Good evening, listeners. This is Bless Radio. It's Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. This is Brother Saad in the studio here in London. Hopefully soon we'll get Brother Gregory online. As usual, the aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdul Shin. And the topic for discussion tonight is our perceptions of reality. So we'd love you to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us here in the studio in UK, it's 079 444 313 66. You can call, text or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 313 66. So I'm going to start with what is the Grail message, as we always do. The Grail message in the light of truth by Abdul Shin is a spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life. For through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I would like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail message, Abdul Shin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole, without leaving any gaps. Again and again in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with 7 seals. And I'd like to finish with one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace, if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So dear listeners, just to remind you, the topic for tonight is our perceptions of reality. You can join us on this number, in UK's number, which is 079 444 313 66. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 313 66. You can call, text or use WhatsApp. I'm just waiting for Brother Gregory to join us. I believe he's on his way. So if you can, while we are waiting for him, I'm going to have a little, you could say, mini talk, you could call it. You know, perception, the topic tonight is our perception of reality. And perception, I mean, everybody is different, we know that, and everyone perceives differently as well. And yet there's, at the same time, as human beings, we have something in common. So although it seems sometimes opposite these things, when we talk about it, there's always a common ground. And so we should, not should, but let's say, I believe everybody's task as a human being is to discover what is their purpose, how should we live our life. It's a discovery. And when you have that journey to go through, each child is born, as you know, has to learn the ropes, and the parents are the ones that educate that child. And we know in our previous discussions, this is a spiritual show. Everybody is a spirit, including the child that lives in that body. So, and we don't stop learning. As a child, when turning into an adult, you always are learning all the time. And one of the things to find out in life is about, science does it all the time, investigate how things work. And so, on day-to-day basis, we are having to assess situations. If something is dangerous, or if something is, meant for in our favor, or something we have to learn in our life. And how do we gauge that? Do we have some abilities that we carry within us, or is it just exploring sort of accidentally almost, trying this, trying that, and hoping for the best? Let me go and see if I can get Brother Gregory back now. Not back, join the show. So hopefully he's there now. I want to thank Sister Marino and Brother Bless for the previous show. It was very interesting discussion they were having. And I hope you were able to listen to that. Let me see if I can get Brother Gregory. Brother Gregory, are you there? Hello? I can't hear you, but I don't know if you can hear me. I think he's on our show now, but it's just he can't hear me at the moment. Hello, Brother Gregory?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you now. I just needed to turn you on, so apologies for that. Welcome to the show. I just want to tell you how it is in London now. The sun is set here. I haven't been out too much today, but it didn't feel too cold. So how was it in Brussels?
Good question. I am not in Brussels. I'm in Lund in Sweden.
Ah, okay. Yes, it's good you've traveled somewhere new. Okay, what is it like in Lund, and whereabouts is Lund? Because I've not heard of that place.
Well, Lund is in south of Sweden, and it's been rainy somehow.
Okay.
It's not a big place. Maybe it's like one or two boroughs in London.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I've told the listeners the topic for tonight is our perceptions of reality.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting topic, really, and let's see what I can ask you on this. It's such a wide-ranging thing. Let's start with something. Is it possible really to perceive reality? Let me say something like that. To see what reality is, or is it we can only have like an impression of it?
Well, the question is such that the answers are embedded. The first thing one will ask is perception of reality. So what comes to one's attention will be, what are the tools of perception? What tools have been made available to us, say, on the earthly basis? So it's good to first examine this particular topic on an intellectual or earthly basis, and then on a non-intellectual, or what one may refer to as an intuitive or a spiritual basis. For the voice of the spirit, or the way the spirit makes itself perceptible is through one's intuition. Therefore, one may find that these tools are necessary to grasp the topic of today, the perception of reality. The facts of perception tells us that we have the senses. Basically, we only have 5 senses, as has been discussed. These 5 senses is what one uses intellectually or on the earthly basis to interact or to perceive. Whereas on the other hand, it is through the intuitive perception that one is able to perceive outside of the earthly realities. So on the one hand, one is looking at earthly reality. On the other hand, one is looking at non-earthly realities. Those non-earthly may be perceived using one's intuition or the intuitive perception, whereas the earthly part of it may be realized using the senses which nature has provided us. So the question is that our perception of reality now depends on our awareness or our inner, maturity, such that when one is fully aware, awareness, which is also tied to consciousness, one is able to perceive more. So the question tends to be personal. How is one able to perceive reality?
Thank you for that. So, from what you're saying, just as you just mentioned now, that each person's perception is personal. So, does that mean that, and you said it depends on the maturity of the person, you know, how much they can see or perceive. So, so that means when somebody sees some incident, what is happening to them, that is, they're interpreting it, and you know, it's from what you have said also, that no two people would be able to see the same way, because you know, no two people are actually the same, right? How they
see precisely. That's, you hit the nail on the head. No two people are actually the same. So their impressions, how to interpret impressions, vary greatly.
So, I mean, this makes it a quite sort of difficult thing to look at something. I'm thinking, for example, let's say there's a court case going on, and there is the victim, and then the person who's accused in the court, and then you hear one story from the prosecutor, and then the other story from the defense, and of course each side is trying to prove their point. Not well, in the end, I believe they're looking for the truth, but or that, at least that should be the aim of the court case, to get to the truth, and but each side will present their own, what is in their favor, you can say. So would you say, when this is the way, so in this, when we think of like that sort of situation, is it possible to have like real justice and or real understanding of what has happened in this situation? Because each person will, like, for example, the accused might say, oh, he'll try to claim diminished responsibility. Most likely he won't say, let's say the evidence is heavily against him, and he will, rather than admit, I'm not saying everybody's the same, but some of them will just say, oh no, it was diminished responsibility, I didn't know this person was like this, and I hit them, and I didn't mean to harm them, and this happened, and he harmed them in a very serious way. So so my question in this matter is it possible to, with every human being having their own impression, to actually achieve justice with this human court system?
Well, the first one must ask, what are the basis of judgment in the so-called court system? If the basis of judgment is solely external impressions or external statements, then the margin of error is great. In any scenario, whatever has happened should be taken as facts. So, as long as a judgment is based on facts, then the evidence which is presented may be looked into impartially. In this case, if a person had taken a particular road, all right, that becomes a fact. If a person hasn't taken a particular road and say, I took this road, then there could be problems. It means that is not a fact. And as we all know, as long as the judge or whoever or the superintendent is intuitive enough, the facts intuitively will be presented in the sense that what has happened has a strong impression, which impression is on nature itself and is indelible. What has not yet happened, one cannot call that a fact. Therefore, as long as the judge is able to perceive intuitively and look at the facts, not only intellectually, but also intuitively, then the margin of error of judgment is minimized. Then you may have, what may refer to as a good judgment. Else, you now have distortions, as you have in many cases nowadays. So it is true that there could be good judgments based on facts, based on evidence which are indelible.
Thank you for that. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned about the intuitive perception there, because if we just only mention the word facts, because somebody can do an action, but does that mean, can those facts show you whether that action is deliberate or, let's say, not malicious? Because harm can be done, that might be proven with the facts, but you may not see if it's deliberate or not deliberate, and that's where I guess what you've said there about intuition has to play their part, because otherwise you can't tell. You actually can't tell just by looking purely on facts.
Most of the time, in most judgments, it is the volition behind it that really swings the case. And most of the time, you'll find that those who are examining the case will ask, what is the motive? The motive always is the volition behind it. It is the force behind it. It is what gives it life, what makes it lively. So what is the motive? So in most judgments, the motive is what many search for. But above all, you have one's intuition to a large extent is able to filter out the motive. Based on experience, you'll find that the intellect is able to classify many of these things. But it is the intuition, which is the movement of the spirit, which is able to identify the motive or the volition behind the facts.
Now, I want to give you a story where people get different impressions of the same incident. And it's like I will give the story in a second, but how we get that impression of some incident is we are colored by our, you could say, our prejudices or our past experiences. So if I give you this story where basically this is a house where people are renting rooms in the house, and one day they're basically having a get together in the garden, and some of those people are smoking cannabis, and then the neighbor observes that, and obviously is not happy about it, and then confronts or not maybe confront, but talks to the owner of the house to say, oh, you've got these bad people in your house, and I'm concerned about my daughter, who's a young daughter there in her house. And when the person, this neighbor, talked to the owner, declaring all those things, the owner, who knew these tenants, or the people who had attended this get-together, said no, then he doesn't agree with what they were doing. That was not meant to happen. However, that's not what these people are. They'll be just addicted to this a drug called cannabis, but that doesn't make them bad people who might do harm, let's say, to her daughter. That is what the neighbor was concerned, that this, from one sort of deed, something else, these become bad people, and suddenly they're capable of something more than just that one bad deed that they're doing. So what the point I'm trying to make here is that people with whatever information or impression that they've got start coming to their own judgment and making conclusion from that, and especially when they have not much information, or the impression is not a very much of a, it's like one incident only that is based on, while the person who knows the people knows that they are not capable of such things. So how can someone be careful in when they make a conclusion about some incident, not jump to some conclusion that would, as I say, would be a false conclusion, but for them it seems true to them that this person is capable of such such a terrible thing. How can we sort of get a right assessment in any incident?
It's quite remarkable that these scenarios, such as you mentioned, are very prevalent. But the key to these, or the key to the solution of what you just mentioned, is the personal alertness. The alertness of the person. There is nothing you can do in trying to, change others. So there's only one thing: change yourself. Become very alert in your neighborhood and learn the necessary lessons. If that person is taking some drugs, one may not know why that person is taking those drugs. If those drugs are maybe for medical reasons, such that they do not go through terrible pains, so be it. So it is the motive behind these things that should be examined. And one should also realize that whatever one does, one should not carry out these activities to harm one's neighbor. Of course, each person has to make decisions, which decisions should be such that they do not harm another person. Else, threads will be woven, which will tie knots, which the other person has to redeem. So each person must take care of himself or herself. There is very little you can do about the other person. Each person must be the change which change they wish to see in others. Change in accordance with the laws through which they themselves came into creation. Thereafter, there's very little you can do, because you cannot compel others to see your point of view. You cannot compel others to spiritual maturity. For spiritual maturity is based on free will.
Now, in a way, we've sort of touched upon this question, what I'm going to say now. So, what are the dangers of having a wrong notion? Because we've talked about a couple of cases here, like the gathering in the garden I mentioned, and then in a court case, people giving their own, presenting their own case. So, what could be the dangers when we reach a wrong notion?
Well, as is well known, it is the notion or the concepts which we harbor deep within ourselves, which either open the path for further maturity or closes the path. If those notions or concepts are not in accordance with the will or with the laws of nature, then you have exceptions, which exceptions will not allow the human spirit to mature in the right way. Those wrong notions will not enable the human spirit to swing in accordance with what is demanded of him. Therefore, the path to further improvement will be blocked, not by others, but because he or she harbors a wrong notion. A very simple one is the case that you have with some religious teaching, where many hold the view that he has died for our sins, and therefore we are saved. Such a notion is utterly and completely wrong. Instead of saying he has died through our sins, we now say he died for our sins so that we will be saved. So these notions either open the way or block the path that we might have used for personal maturity. For when the human spirit realizes what it is, realizes its capability, and has the right notions, then is able to swing in accordance with the will of him that granted him life.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrushin. And if you would like to get a copy of the Grail message or get to know more about the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'm going to spell that. www.grail, G-R-A-I-L, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic we are discussing tonight is our perceptions of reality. So please do join us with any question or comments. The number here in UK, it is 079 444 313 66. You can call, text or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 313 66. Again, you can call, text or use WhatsApp. Now, Gregory, we've been talking about the intuition and or let's say spiritual and earthly impressions, or earthly and non-earthly impressions. And we mentioned the earthly are the five senses that we fully aware of them, and also we can use our intellect there, and then also and then they have the spiritual or the non-earthly impressions, and that is from the intuition. So first of all, Brother Gregory, can we rely on all these impressions, that is the earthly and the non-earthly or spiritual, let's call it earthly and spiritual, can we rely on these impressions? And if not, what are the limitations? What should we be careful about? Yeah, please tell us about that.
Any impression that strikes us first must be examined very carefully. That is part of the alertness which we have discussed, mentioned earlier. For when you have impressions without examining them and to see how they fit, how can you rely on something without examination? For instance, if you have a bridge, if you do not test that bridge with all sorts of load on it, how can you be sure that if you have a caterpillar passing through that big bridge, it will not collapse? So whatever strikes us must be examined and examined thoroughly. Only through continuous examination, not only spiritually, but also on the earthly part, only that will grant us the possibility of making sense out of what looks does not seem to make sense. The intuition enables one to discover. The intuition enables one to have some cognitions. The intellect mainly sort of rearranges things in such a sequence or in a logical pattern so that one is able to make sense out of it. That is the cooperation between one's intuition and one's intellect. The details of what one has just mentioned can be found in lectures which has been given in the work In the Light of Truth. Therefore, one should check at one particular lecture intuitive perception. All right, and there's another lecture, the inner voice. This gives so much information as to grant man clarity, but a realization of this must be done sequentially, gradually, such that one becomes clear. For as long as one is highly mobile, deep within, which is equivalent to real activity, then one is seeking. And as has been said, whoever seeks diligently definitely will find.
Thank you for that. Since you mentioned the Grail message there, Gregory, was there anything you would like to share with the listeners or quote something from there?
Well, I was thinking one will read these things later.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I'm looking in. I will definitely read a few things later.
Okay, that's fine. Now, you mentioned the intuition there, and you've mentioned also earlier about the maturity of each person, and the more mature, the more sensitive you can observe something or pick up something. So how can we become more be able to develop our intuition, let's say, or how can we become more mature? Maybe that's the other way to put it, that we can sense things, what is happening around us in the more, I'm going to use the word more accurately. Yeah. How can we, develop our intuition or become more mature?
It is said the first impression is always right. But that should not be taken for granted. One has to experience again and again. There are impressions that will strike us and we go through experiences which seem very bitter. There are impressions that will strike us and we go through experiences which seem very sweet. Whether it is bitter or sweet, as long as we strive to learn the necessary lessons in accordance with the laws of creation, and not and not base our responses to these lessons on vengeance. Then, along the line, certain paths will open to us, and we will now understand why that particular experience had to come to our path. On the long run, one will then understand the laws of creation, particularly the law of attraction of homogeneity, or the law of reciprocal action. Why something had to come your path so that you will either mature by developing those innate resources that you have within you, or it has come across your path such that one is to redeem some past, some knots, or to untie certain knots that had been tied maybe long ago, maybe not in this earth life. As long as one proceeds along such a direction, then things will become clearer and clearer. And that means one is entering a phase of awareness, which awareness one had ignored much earlier.
Now, I want to explore another area, which is, art, and you could say music and so on. And the people who are those artists, they may not be, let's say, I don't say in every case, but you notice as a child grows or something, they're, are attracted to certain things more, or they see something on TV or whatever, and they're certainly moved towards that, to take up that talent, you can say. So, and obviously we know, for example, science is quite an intellectual sort of area, and art seems to be more of a spiritual, well, it's all about impressions, isn't it? Arts is people receive something and then they create something from that impression that they receive. So my question is it in the work of art, let's say, and or even let's say sciences, we can look both of them together. Are we meant to sort of specialize one more in intuition and the other one more in intellectual, using one more intellectual ability and the other one more intuitive ability? Like, as I say, with arts and science, are they like is it like a speciality that we human beings, if you want to follow a particular path?
For the human spirit to mature, the human spirit is able to send out impressions, and those impressions come through the back brain, and from the back brain they are transmitted to the frontal brain. What science does is to collect or collate these impressions and refine them. Not only does it collect them, it categorizes them, it rearranges them. As long as one knows that science makes use of what exists and not what does not exist, and it seeks its evidence in the earthly, then there will be progress. Whereas on the other hand, you have the intuitive perception, which many times the artist is able to, express in his work, be it music or whatever it's called. The intellect and the spirit are supposed to work in harmony. One sending out impressions to the earthly world through the intellect, and in reverse, once that has been completed, whatever the result is passed back to the intellect and passed on to the spirit for it to mature. So the cycle is then completed. So what is intended, or what nature stipulates, is the cooperation between one and the other. If, however, the intellect does not pass the impression it has received from the outer world back to the spirit, then the spirit cannot use the impressions to mature. And that is not what is intended. That cycle needs to be completed. So one cannot say one is better than the other, for the cycle must come to a close. Whatever the intellect has received, it needs to pass on to the spirit. It is the spirit that makes the final decision.
Can I just repeat what you said, the last sentence? Did you say the spirit is the one who makes the final or finer? I didn't quite.
Finer.
Finer.
F-I-N-E-R. The final decisions.
Okay. Thank you for that. When you were talking there, I just got another thing came in my head there about mediums. They also receive impressions, and I know there are many people who are skeptical and say this is just fantasy or imagination, and these people are just trying to make money. But they claim, many mediums will claim, no, we are connecting with the people who have passed on who are now in the beyond, and they're able to pass message to the people here who somehow some of the people who are on the earth left here feel they want to be in touch with the people who have passed on. They had some close connection or whatever reason they have, and then they approach a medium. I'm sort of distracting a little bit, but so my point first, the question on this one really is, are mediums really using some ability where they can perceive something that in the beyond, or is it just hocus pocus?
The abilities of the medium are dependent on the blood radiation of the medium. The medium that acts like a receptacle where impressions are poured. That does not mean that the medium understands completely those impressions. For a medium may transmit information passed to it in a language that the medium does not understand. Of course, there are many scenarios where there are fakes, as with all professions, whether it be intellectual profession or not. There are many fakes because there are people who like fakes. There are people who like genuine gold, and there are some who like fake gold. That does not mean one has to, be derogatory to mediums. As long as one is able to use one's intuition to make those final decisions, then the medium or the buffer of error is minimized.
Now, I'm going to present another sort of example here. People have heard of this MMR vaccine. It came some years ago now. It was introduced, and but basically a vaccine for a number of, let's say, 3 diseases. I think measles and something else. I can't remember exactly now. And then when it came out, there were some people making the claim that if you get injected by this vaccine, there could be like a side effect. I don't know if it's the right word, side effect, but there's possibly a danger of getting leading to autism or some other colitis disorder, which and a scientist was who had done this research was promoting that, and then many years later he's actually been found to be he was discredited and struck off as a doctor. But what happened was many people, when this was happening, many people started to avoid using this vaccine, which was normally for, every child would be having it. And then, so many young people were unvaccinated and became susceptible to measles. Even I believe there's one case which is in the news, I think this week, where they did get some. It's like they lost their senses in by not having this vaccine. It was not the vaccine was in this particular case. It wasn't to. I could say. It wasn't the vaccine would have protected them from measles or not. It was something else that developed from it, and which they could have been protected by had they had the vaccine. So anyway, so my question about it really is, when we have some, let's say, new invention or new approach to, in this case, treating some disease or potential disease, and we have like two sides to the argument, or two cases presented, whether one might be true, one might be false, opposing well, obviously both can't be true if they're opposing each other. How can one person who is not a scientific person, or does not even have all the facts in front of them, how can one make a decision, whether to take that vaccine, in this case it's a vaccine we are talking about, or not to take it, because, as I say, we do not have all that information. So how can, and then you've got these stories, like I say, opposing stories, and you don't know who to believe.
In these vaccines or in science, there was no claim that these things are perfect. Were that the case, then you could hold those who did the manufacturing, you could call them to order. There are grains of truth on either side. And what is required is continuous refinement. So one cannot say one party has lied and the other person has not lied. As we all know, you cannot give something which you do not yet have to another. That which science is able to give, it gives, but it's not 100% correct. Is it effective? One, again, has to look at the scenario. No two human bodies are exactly the same, and therefore the reactions or response to a particular vaccine will vary. So it is very complex, and therefore one has to be very careful and prayerfully, make decisions in such a way that it will not destroy another person's reputation. For on the one hand, you will find some people who are looking very carefully on how to produce vaccines which will be of great help to humanity. On the other hand, they know that there are shortcomings in these preparations. The question is that if they are humble enough, how can they move forward? Should they, because this thing is not yet perfect, withdraw completely? That will not be right. At the initial stages, all the vaccines, the injections we used to take, before it came into being, there were other treatments. But as time went on, these things were refined and refined and refined. It should also be realized that the human body does not remain the same, does not remain in the same state. There is continuous improvement. There is continuous evolution of the human body. And therefore, these things have to be balanced by those who are striving to produce the vaccine and by those who are the critics. For before the critics can make those statements, they need to know what is involved in the process of preparation and say, how can we move these things forward in a step-by-step manner, rather than just sit down, do nothing, criticize what others are doing.
Thank you for that, Gregory. I've got something else, sort of continuing from what you've just talked about. this is one person that I came across. They had this particular view. I will say it's not a very so widely held view. So some people are, are against what they consider unnatural methods to treat our health issues. For example, and we just talked about this vaccine. So some people think vaccines injections are not good because it involves inserting dead organism into our bodies. Despite this procedure is known to build our immune system to help prevent diseases, and there's another aspect to that. Is surely it is a good idea that we, prevention is better than cure. Is a very well known saying. So how can we sort of you've mentioned in the earlier answer that science is not perfect or things are not perfect. You can't. Each person is different, and one person's I was going to say one person's food may be another person's poison, but I didn't mean it in that sort of way. I meant basically one treatment may work or vaccine might work for somebody, and for another person it may not work. So when people are having certain views, like they say they don't want to use unnatural methods to treat their health issues, and in this case, let's say they're against vaccines because they think it's not right to insert a dead organism into our body. How would we move forward in this sort of situation? Because you've said the thing is not perfect. Maybe we are developing something, for example, they're looking at a cure for cancer. That's been going on for quite a few years, and it's only like an iterative process. They don't know if something's going to work. They just try this, they try that. So should we avoid something because we have some, let's say, misgivings about it? What can we do about such things?
As long as those iterative processes are done very intuitively, then, like we keep stressing, the margin of error is minimized. A counter example is, here are people who drive cars or go into a plane and travel from one place to the other. The car is not a natural thing. It is artificial. It was built. The same thing with the airplane. All right, and at the initial stages, these things were done gradually, and they kept improving on it until they got where we are now. The same thing happens in medicine, where there is a start, and then you have continuous iterations and improvement. When you now have people say, okay, I don't wish to go along this direction, they are perfectly correct in the sense that they have their own free will to decide. If they themselves sense that it may not be good for them, let them withdraw from it. For it may be that the state of health of their body may not agree with that particular medication which is being put forward. One cannot hold them guilty, but they have made their decisions. In other cases, there are some who will want to give it a try. So one cannot say, oh, okay, until you agree with me, I cannot move forward. As long as one's intuition is on the alert, many a problem might be avoided. What is not right is to say, okay, don't make any progress in medicine without, having another way out and say, okay, we will only do this, we will not do this. You find what is so-called alternative medicine and so-called scientific medicine, sometimes they work hand in hand. All that is needed is to find out how these things can work in harmony for the improvement of the health of humanity, rather than moving away and casting all sorts of doubts and insults at whoever is trying to improve the health of mankind. For on the one hand, you have the scientific method, so-called scientific method. On the other hand, you have those who said this is alternative medicine. All right? And which one should we take? The simple answer is examine both of them and see how they can help you as a person. Don't worry about others.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Dear listeners, you're listening to the Spiritual Discussion Program on Tuesday night, is 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And you can get a copy of the Grail message, or if you want to get more information, by going to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'm going to spell that, www.grail, G-R-A-I-L, message, MESSAGE.com. And the topic for discussion tonight is our perceptions of reality. We'd love you to join us with your questions or comments. The number to contact us here in UK, it is 079 444 31366. You can call, text or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. Gregory, I'm going to go into another sort of angle because all of we've been talking perceptions, and it's such a wide variety, such a big field, this perceptions. And you mentioned about already earlier about maturity, you know, in having impressions through intuition. And then the other one, we just slightly mentioned it before, consciousness. You know, you're conscious of something. So what is consciousness?
Basically, one may refer to consciousness as being aware. Aware of one's environment, awareness of one's capabilities, awareness of not only the physical environment, but also non-physical environment. But basically, that word awareness is linked to consciousness.
Thank you for that. And then we've mentioned also in our previous shows that we are human beings are a spirit, and what makes us different from, let's say, animals is that we are self-conscious. So what is that? Can you tell us more? What is self-conscious? What does that mean?
We just mentioned that awareness is, say, equivalent or similar to consciousness. Self-consciousness may be discussed as the awareness of one's inner capabilities or abilities, and developing these inner abilities, because it is linked to the inner core, which is referred to as the self.
Thank you for that. And just again a little bit further into this, there's something we know as subconscious, and so really, again, if you can help us with what that is about, being, you know, seeing things.
The word subconscious is used most of the time when it is referred to with respect to the intellect being active, and below the intellect there are certain impressions which are coming in, but the intellect is not conscious of these impressions, and therefore it is referred to as being subconscious. But this so-called subconsciousness, when things are referred to the intellect, these subconsciousness are the impressions that have streamed from out of the human spirit or from the back brain.
Thanks for that. And you know, you hear also a lot in the world today that some. Okay, let me go before I. Well, I'll put it into this question. Let me put it into this question. You know, we've mentioned before, life is about experiencing, and so many people say, "Oh, this makes them feel truly alive," you know, and so when my question really is that would that, when you say you're truly alive, does that mean you're like very fully mature, that you can sense everything what is going on, or it's just an expression of like at that moment that you something excites you, and then it's like you feel truly alive just because of that moment?
That's what truly alive to describe a state where they are fully engaged in activities. But behind it stands that being truly alive, in the sense we have the cooperation of the intuitive perception and the taking of these perceptions for the intellect to interpret it correctly, and then the outer expressions coming in and going back through the intellect to the back brain and to the spirit. When you have that state, many are excited and they use the word, "I feel truly alive." Of course, you are truly alive because that is what is intended. On the other hand, you have a state where those impressions don't go back to the spirit. Then you won't hear that word truly alive.
Thank you for that. And okay, I'm going to go into another thing that's in the news a lot nowadays, which is fake news. You know, you hear all these stories now. Even something happens in the world and is being reported by this general media, and then there's some other people somehow with a opposite, some sort of agenda, where they have to twist or distort that news story and spread it to the world as well, and then that we get to know as fake news. And I mean, even this is, although this maybe not be the big point, but children are not able to tell the difference also. It's just like, I mean, in the future world, this is going to be such a sort of widespread thing. Now, you know, how can we really, again, we are not there when some of these news comes out, you know, we are not there watching what's happening. We just see maybe the video with the reporter brings on the TV, or what the newspapers say, and then online, social media, whatever, they pass it around. You know, this WhatsApp, we hear lots of things being passed around. How can we, you know, with all these different perceptions we've been talking about, if we are not experiencing that story by being there, how can we sort of know if that is real, or if it's just or fake, basically?
It is the intellect which can be fooled by fake information, because the intellect has its own limitations, which limitations are bound to the earthly conceptions of space and time, not the spirit. The spirit is not fooled. So as long as one's spirit is on the alert, is able to filter out that which is fake from that which is genuine, or that which is not fake. For you had mentioned it, distorted stories. Take, for instance, we made it very clear before, where it is said he died for you. This has not been examined. As long as the human spirit is asleep and does not examine whatever comes across to it, then the possibility is there that all sorts of distorted information are passed to it. So it is not a new phenomenon. It has been going on. And many religions even thrive on such fake information. Mention a religion that has not been attached to so much fake information, false information. So it's been around. But it is the human spirit that's able to filter out the finer things. The intellect can be fooled, but the human spirit, as long as it's alive, as long as it's vibrating, always examine what comes to it, through it, is able to determine that which swings in accordance with the will of its creator. Then all that is fake will be separated from all that is genuine.
And I want to take an example that's been in the sports news. I don't know if you've heard this one. Basically, Chelsea were playing, I can't remember which team they were playing, but the Chelsea manager wanted to substitute, it was like the 90th minute or the extra time, I can't remember exactly. The Chelsea manager wanted to substitute his goalkeeper at the last minute because he thought he was injured, and he wanted, well, some people thought maybe he wanted a different goalkeeper to take the penalties that were going to happen soon, and he thought the injured goalkeeper wouldn't be up for those penalties. And yet the goalkeeper refused to well, go off the pitch, and then the manager got very upset. And that's what we saw on the TV screen. And after that had happened, the story came out that there was a misunderstanding, because it looked from this TV screens that the goalkeeper was basically undermining the authority of the manager and not listening to the manager, just disobeying the manager, which is completely unheard of, because the manager is in charge of the whole team. And then later the story came out that actually there was a misunderstanding, that manager was actually thinking he was injured, and the goalkeeper saying, no, I wasn't injured, and that's why he refused to go down out of the to be substituted. Now, and now people look at body language, and they, and then they look at these facts. What actually, like you said, we mentioned about facts. Something's going on, and there's the facts. And then there's the impressions which we get from the thing. So when the commentators who saw that video and or let's say the end of the night when they have the TV show doing the highlights, pretty much everybody thought, oh no, this person is goalkeeper is disobeying his manager, and it's like a serious incident here, and some sort of disciplinary thing should happen. And as I said, the story that came out after was completely something different. It was almost trying to save face about what actually happened. So my question on this is really, because you see that you could say even it happens in politics, where somebody, let's say something they're not supposed to say, and then they try to twist the story to something else, which somehow adds up, but actually doesn't really make sense when you, because as I say, when you look at it, it just seems like you can see somebody's upset, and it doesn't look like, as I said, trying to. So what the question I have there is, how can we be aware if somebody's trying to manipulate or twist, the real, using the facts, in a, so in there, let's say, to give a different impression to what is reality, because it just doesn't seem real that somebody can, obviously disobey someone, and then, everybody knows the rules, and then they somehow are able to convince us that, it was a misunderstanding, and the manager accepted that misunderstanding.
The problem is always thinking everybody knows the rules. One scenario that you should consider very carefully is what we all learned in kindergarten, which goes like this: twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. It said, twinkle, twinkle, little star, because what has been seen looks little. But ask yourself, or examine carefully, is the star little? These are the questions. Another scenario in which you wake up and see the sun rising from the east and setting in the west. The sun is supposed to have risen from the east and sets in the west. The impression which is meant by that, it is the sun that is moving around the earth. Has it been examined? Now it is very clear that it is the earth that moves around the sun. And those who at that time said that's not the case, that it must be the earth moving around the sun, were persecuted and even killed. So whatever you see doesn't mean it is a reality. There is always the need that a human spirit must be alive, must examine that, all that comes across, in order to gain clarity. Only through clarity can it move forward. Else, the whole story becomes nebulous. The story is just related. Seen from the outside, people draw conclusions. But did they reflect what must have happened? The moral of the story is that the human spirit must be alive, must examine everything that comes in path, so that it can draw the right conclusion. Not draw the conclusion intellectually, but draw the conclusion spiritually. For only that which is of spirit, only that is permanent, only that which lasts for a very, very long time. As long as the spirit is shut out, just like those people who just saw something without due reflection, made their conclusion. So it is the same problem, but presenting itself in different formats, whether it be football, or it be astronomy, or it be medicine, is the same problem with all the manifold consequences, where people just say, Hosanna today, because they lack the inner understanding, they will crucify you tomorrow.
Actually, Yes, thank you for that. Because although I know we're not into politics in this show, obviously Brexit is a very big thing in UK, and you have seen. I just saw a TV program I think yesterday, where certain politicians, not certain, all politicians are being attacked in a very savage. I mean, that's not even an understatement. In a horrifically disgusting way, hang them. I mean, I won't even repeat more than that, but basically, people who oppose, let's say a group of people opposing a particular politician's stand on Brexit, on either side, doesn't matter which they are, the opposing side has been attacking, and that's even an understatement. Like I said, if you actually saw what the words are and what heard what they are, even the word disgusting is not enough. It's like nasty is, it just doesn't. You can't really use the right words to give that impression. But very terrible things have been said, and and this is of course on social media, because in fact there was one opportunity, this documentary, they even tried to find out who are these people who are making these social media comments, and then in one case they did a little invite to them, come and meet the MP who's you're against, to talk about what to make basically an argument, present what you want to present, and to face to that MP that you supposedly disagree with that person, and of course they didn't show up. So what was my point in all this talking? So what I'm trying to say there is that people have, they start, let's say, getting so angry, and the way they they oppose something somebody has said, and they get so, it's not vociferous. I mean, they want to actually kill that person. That's how the words come out of them, even though that may not actually happen yet. It hasn't happened. None of that has actually happened, except we have one case of an MP who was killed, obviously, during the referendum in 2016. It actually somebody, some extremist person, came out. But these threats are now being made, non-stop, basically, and then people are saying this is like unacceptable. So my question on that is, how can we, is there something can be done, where people can live in a peaceful way with, whatever somebody says something, can we disagree with that person and not have this like extreme reaction, of almost basically murdering that person? That's how it's coming across. I know this may not be exactly something about perception, but the world today is like that people are turning, voicing their whatever ideas they have inside them in this incredibly explosive and derogatory way. As I say, I can't even find the right words to actually suit these things. So is there anything that can be done to turn people, it doesn't look human, basically. That's what I'm trying to say.
There is an error. Which error you made when you said nowadays? Majority of humanity has always been like that. Let us go back to the time of Christ, where it was said, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. And only a few hours later, it was crucified. That makes it very clear that what you have are just simple sectarians, indolence of the highest kind. For if one had examined the expressions, has examined scenarios very carefully, intuitively, many a thing would not occur. Governments cannot make any law to stop that, because government consists of human spirit, and if these same human spirits are not matured, then the situation remains the same. How can one make laws when those who are supposed to make the laws do not even understand the scenario they are dealing with? The human spirit has a free will, So the only thing that may be done or said is wake up, develop your own inner judgment, allow the spirit to come to the fore. Be very careful in whatever you say. Be very careful about quick judgment. Have deeper reflections. But how many people nowadays hold back themselves, whether they're in government or not? Go to the US and listen to what comes from heads of government. Come to the UK and listen to what comes out from the head of government. Are these not leaders? If those who are at the head, who are supposed to make policies, we say crucify today, just because they don't like certain things, what do you then say of it? So there has been no improvement in the states on inner maturity of humanity, for the lack of understanding of the laws that govern creation is what causes this sort of sickness. Actually, is some form of illness, where you have the scenario where the human spirit or the personality decides without hearing things out, as long as it affects others. When it affects them, they want to be heard very carefully. It's always the same thing. So what can be done? Let's, whoever intends that things should be better, let them be the change. Let them seek to understand the impressions that assail them. Let them seek to understand correctly the laws of creation through which they themselves came into being. Then patience and understanding and perseverance will develop in all naturalness. Else, no legislation can force the human spirit to improve. That decision for improvement must come from deep within, for the human spirit has the free will to decide whether it wishes to improve or not. It cannot be forced from the outside.
Thank you for that. And following from what you've been saying there, when people are in sales or marketing, and let's say they know how human beings are. You've given an example there of how even politicians or leaders are behaving in a very immature way or very ignoble way. And so looking at just if the public is doing the same thing, there should be no surprise when the leaders are doing it. So now I'm trying to shift to something a bit different now. So we have obviously people have jobs where they have selling a product or whatever it is, and they know to get a customer, it's almost like it's not like supermarket. You just leave something in the shelf and then people pass it and they pick what they like and off they go. Some products requires more effort than that, than just picking something off the shelf, and so it's like you have to sell it, you have to find good points so that the customer will come and buy it. So what you find is some of these sales, I don't want to put everybody in the same bracket, but you'll find sales people just pushing a particular agenda that let's say pointing out only the good points and not mentioning anything of the bad points for their product, and what I could call it putting a spin, as the politicians say, putting a spin on it, so again, or a bias, let me say something like this. So again, can we you've said already, we have to use our intuition and examine everything what people say. But what I want to say is, if the majority of people are in a particular way like this, that you can't sell them if you speak just the truth. You almost have to, I'm just going to say lie. What else can I say? Or give them a like I say, put a spin on it. You give all the good things on that product so that people actually buy it. Otherwise, if you tell all the whole facts about it, people will say, oh well, I don't want it then. So, do we have to present something that appeals to people in a, like, say, I'm going to use the word manipulation way, manipulative way, can't even say the word, to actually sell a product. And I'm not saying the product is a derogatory product. It's just simply for people to buy it, you need to sort of say something that goes beyond just simply facts. So how can we, is because basically what I'm pointing to is the public will not buy something unless it's sold to them in a particular way. That's what or am I saying that that's just not correct?
I think it is not very right to say the public will not buy. That means one is classifying everybody as being the same. That will not be right. There is a variation in the range of maturity of human spirit on earth. Many will want to understand what they are procuring for themselves. I want to know the limitations. And some others may not be bothered about it. But one thing is very clear. Whether one is a seller or one is a buyer, the seller tries to sell a product. It's like the seller is sowing. If in the process of sowing, it has lied about the facts, it has sown, it has tied a knot, which before too long, the seller, will have to redeem. The key thing here is spiritual awareness. For if a seller understands that it is he or she is tying down himself on the long run, then it will be very careful what it says or what it doesn't say. It is because they lack the understanding that each person makes a decision and therefore ties a knot or loosens a knot, which knot becomes like a fate, something which they have to reap later because they have sown. Once there is that inner clarity, then many of the evils you'll find on earth will vanish, because no one will purposely want to tie a knot for themselves such that they are unable to move further. No one will personally want to sort of suffocate themselves when they know that in doing that to others, these things will return back to them. The thing is that because they lack this personal conviction, they just do as they wish. And when the returns come here or hereafter, they are oblivious of the cause that has placed that into creation. And that is why discussions of this nature is to stress the spiritual seeds which is being sown in making decisions to lie or not to lie, or selling or not to sell. For the seeds definitely will sprout, will mature, and the response based on what they have done will fall back. Now you can imagine someone who intends to sell some medication, which medication they know is the wrong medication, but they put a spin on it, and that is now sold to some other person's child. Would they have done it to their own children? Ignorance of the law is no excuse for whatever a soul has sown, has put into creation. Whatever a soul has given cause to, that is what it has to reap sooner or later, here or hereafter. There's no getting around it. When the human spirit is clear enough and has become fully convinced of this, then fewer crimes will emerge.
Thank you so much for that, Gregory. I think you built a really big, sort of a clear picture of the consequences of these, our actions and how we are, go about our life. Because when you are ignorant about these spiritual consequences, then of course you will do things which you'll regret, and you won't. The regret may not happen even on the earth. You don't know, But when you start thinking about it, just like what you gave that example there, about selling some medicine which is not correct, not appropriate for someone, and then look at the consequence, and you wouldn't do it to your own child, so why would you do it to somebody else's? It such makes it so up front, in front, you can't ignore it. So thank you for that. Now I was thinking, Gregory, did you want to share anything from the Grail message? I just remind listeners, dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrushin, and the topic we're discussing tonight is our perceptions of reality. So and of course, if you want to know more about the Grail message or get a copy of the Grail message, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, MESSAGE.com. Yes, Gregory, I think you had said earlier that there's something you'd like to share from the Grail message for the listeners.
Yes, because there was a question that came in along the line, and I thought that question was going to be discussed.
Okay. Do you want to tell us that, just to remind me? Yeah.
The question about someone sent in.
Okay.
Let me check.
Oh yes, I think I know what it is now. Which is, does our perception of reality have any effect on the reality? I guess that's what is that the one?
Yes.
So yes,
it's a profound question, and you have different formats of this particular question being asked.
Okay.
Which is our perception of reality and how it affects reality itself. Reality in itself, one may refer to as what gives rise to many things. Therefore, if one is talking about the truth itself, the truth is real, and the light is real. One cannot deny these things. However, when one is referring to as truth, which is real, thinking about it or our perceptions of the truth, which is real, does not change the truth itself. For truth is eternal unchangeableness. Therefore, our perceptions of it, that is only our appreciation, our awareness of the truth. So that does not change the truth itself. It is we ourselves, the human spirit, that need to mature in our perceptions, in our awareness, to come to appreciate it. And to that extent, there was a question which was asked long time ago, which I thought one would look into. Which question is, which was asked the author of the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail message. And in this particular question, it was said, what is truth? To which he gave the answer, truth is the eternal unchangeable, which never changes in its form, but as it has been eternally and will ever remain as it is now, which can therefore never be subjected to any development either, because it has been perfect from the very beginning. Truth is real. It is being. Only being is true life. The entire universe is supported by this truth. Therefore, only that which issues from the truth is really living. Everything else is subject to transformation through death. For this reason, only that which issues from the truth will alone continue to exist, and everything else will perish. Finally, nothing will remain in existence but the word of the Lord, which issues from the light and from the truth, and can only be brought by messengers of God, who themselves stand in the light and the truth, who are thus really alive within themselves. No human spirit, no spirit in the beyond is in the position to do this. There is no possibility whatever for it to do so. For this reason, those things thought out by the human mind and recognized by the human spirit can never bear genuine life within them. They remain theories and recognitions which lack the power of the living truth. To awaken to life through the word means to awaken to the recognition of the truth. As a sleeping person can be awakened to the day, so one who is spiritually dead is awakened to the recognition of the truth through the living word. However, just as he who has been awakened from sleep to the day can never become the day itself, so also the one awakened from spiritual death to the living truth will not himself at the same time become life. He will only have his eyes open to the recognitions of this life. He can never himself become life or truth, but only wander on its paths. He becomes one raised from the dead. I will stop there. These sort of questions demand further deep reflection to come to many clarity.
Thank you for that, Gregory, what you read there from the author of the Grail message, Abdushin. You said he was answering a question. What was the question Abdushin was answering there that you talked about? That you read out, sorry. I think it was what is truth?
The question is, what is truth?
What is truth? So my question following from that then is, can we actually know the truth, or how can I say, see the truth, it doesn't appear that's possible for the human being. From what you've read there, we can't really. I mean, the truth is alive and is life, and we are not, as human spirits, according to what you read there, are like that. We are not, we are not capable of, let's say, seeing the truth, or, yeah.
The words saying the truth, one can wrap these things up as perception of the truth. For seeing is only a sensing. And when the word seeing or hearing, these are attached to the five senses. So one really cannot talk of seeing the truth. One is able to perceive the truth. In this perception, you find so-called seeing or hearing or smelling or tasting. They are all involved with respect when the truth is discussed. However, only the human spirit, not the intellect, is capable of perceiving it, for it is of a different consistency. And because it's of a different consistency, it can, through its own maturity and activity, awaken, just as when it set out from its origin, which is the paradise of men. That paradise which sometimes is referred to as Jerusalem. That paradise which sometimes is referred to that its streets is filled with gold. That paradise that sets the human spirit to ultimate joy. Whilst there, it was unconscious, it was unaware, and needed to leave its origin because the motion there was too swift. So it needed to journey away such that gradually those inner capabilities which had been put into it will flower. It is those inner capabilities, when developed, that is able to recognize the truth. And as the maturity increases, is able to open up, embrace the truth and the light, whereas it itself is not the truth or the light, but is able to embrace this because it now comes to the realization. It has now left that position or that state of its consciousness or unconsciousness, gradually becoming conscious, and now having developed those inner abilities, becomes self-conscious, for the spirit is strictly the self. That is what it uses through its intuition to move from that state of cognition where it is aware, or that state of awareness, to recognition where it can understand the laws which govern nature and the laws which also govern creation, and is able to harmonize and swing in these laws such that it becomes fully conscious. And as long as those inner abilities are developed, is able to partake of the joys up there. That is the longing which has been hammered deep within the human spirit, the prospect of which, once these inner abilities are developed, is able to go back home as a self-conscious spirit to enjoy and to be fully awake of the consciousness and the joys that the rapture which swings in paradise.
Thank you for that. I mean, that is incredible what you have said, because, I will say most of the people are not even aware, this is an individual journey, We are brought up with the belief or indoctrination, whatever you want to call it, as children into something, and then, let's say, majority of the people just follow that into their adulthood, not questioning what they are taught. Millions are following a particular, let's say, belief or religion, and here you have said each one is on his own path, and he has to develop himself, become conscious, self-conscious, experience, weigh and examine, So, and then earlier when you were reading the question of an answer by Abdushin, the author of the Grail message, about what is truth, it was said in there that there is the truth, life is truth, or truth is life, and then we can't actually be that. And also there are messengers that have been sent, where I'm going now is we have these beliefs in quotes in different religions which have been brought by these messengers of God, and we have, in this answer it is said that these messengers have been carrying that truth or standing in the truth that they have brought. So in what it implies is that there is truth in these teachings from these messengers of God, and yet and people follow this, you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do this, or you believe in this, or like life after death or whatever, and it's all taken as the word belief, just accepted that that's what it is. But here what you have been saying, Gregory, is about that each one must weigh himself, examine himself, must experience that, which is so different to, let's say, what people are used to. Can you explain how it is that these religions or beliefs are the way they are, and what is real, and then, say how are we meant to, and we said that those teachings have also come from God, you see, and here the Grail message we also mentioned, which is what we are introducing to the public here, is also from God to help man on his journey. So how can these apparently coming from the same source look so different?
Well, maybe you made a bold statement and say these teachings of religions came from the all highest, or from whatever one is capable of classifying. One would not even say so. How can one believe something without examining this statement? Only that which one is able to bring to personal conviction, only that is what one should hold. Because the teachings themselves must be examined in relation with the laws which have been woven into creation. What has not been understood or has been mentioned in the past is that there are laws which govern creation. There are laws which govern how man is born. One does not expect that man just falls from a tree. And yet, many a teaching may tell you you just fell out from a tree. There are laws which man has to examine, which laws are so simple that most of the time they are ignored. So, whether the teaching is from on high or not, the key thing is that whatever comes to you must be examined. Examined in accordance with the laws through which the human spirit, has come into existence. Failing to do so spells doom. For in self-examination, one is able to differentiate that which is true, which is self-consistent. For we are told a house divided against itself cannot stand. That we are sure of. Therefore, because these facts or this truth is self-consistent and is readily available, then we do not expect things to change as quickly as we sometimes think. Therefore, each personality, young or old, need to examine what has been passed on to it. Else, that which is fake will be passed to it and it will accept it. So it calls for personal examination. That we discuss these things in this forum doesn't mean it should be taken literally. It should be examined. Many a times disagree with it and review it again and again and again. Only such will be helpful. Not only does one need to use the intellect in collating, in assembling the facts which are presented, but one should use one's own intuition to make the final decision, to filter out and to keep examining not one experiences, but many and many experiences. Whether it be joy or sorrow, one should not stop, but keep on examining whatever comes across our path. Then one is able to eliminate fake news from the real news. For how can you say it is not fake when you haven't examined it? Like we just mentioned, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Seen by the man, he says it's a little star. But on personal examination, he finds that star is much, much bigger. Unless the human spirits continue to examine, then failure and doom is likely to overtake it.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for that. We've come to the end of our show, listeners. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. The topic was perceptions, our perceptions of reality. And as always, the aim of the show is to introduce you to the Grail message in the light of truth by Abdrusheen. And you can get a copy of that by going to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'm going to spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, message.com. We'll be back next week, Tuesday, with another topic which I have yet to discover, but we will be there next week, Tuesday. Gregory, anything you would like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
I wish them a very good week, and we hope that discussions will prompt them to examine whatever comes their path, be it sweet or bitter.
Thank you for that. Thank you, listeners, for being with us tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show, and God bless, and see you next week.